So today I want to go over why crowdfunding is literally the #1 most underrated and least talked about shortcut or hack or secret into building an online business for everybody, right? It's literally the #1 greatest equalizer when it comes to anything to build a business in the 21st century, yet no one is talking about it, okay? So just to illustrate to you the kind of power of crowdfunding and what you could achieve with it, I have a company in front of me on the screen here called the Woo Runners. And this company, as you can see here, launched in 2016. By this point, they only have an idea. They haven't built the product, right? They only have an idea in their minds when they raise this money. And you can see they raised just a little bit shy of $120,000 from 970 backers in 2016. Now, today their names are different. They changed their names. They no longer call the Woo Runners. But just to give you some context, these guys sell shoes. Okay, no socks, no smell. So think about what these guys could be, because I'm gonna review it in a second. But I want you to think about, if you can guess who these guys are, right? So these guys are actually today called Allbirds. So you might have heard of it, but it is spelled Allbirds, Allbirds. And today they are a billion-dollar company, like over $1 billion. And that's crazy, because if you think about it, literally around 4 years ago, or less than 4 years ago, they only raised $120,000, not even, right? And today they're a billion-dollar company, 1 billion, right? 1 billion plus, which is mind-blowing in 4 short years. And so they started their company with crowdfunding, and they're able to grow it into a billion-dollar company. Yet you don't really hear about crowdfunding, right? But the way you start a company matters, because your future success of your company really comes down to like the first 6 months, the first few years of your company's growth. So why is crowdfunding so? Why do I call it the secret, the hack to building a business? And to understand that, you have to understand the traditional way of starting a business. So traditionally, you have an idea. Okay, let's say you have an idea for a business. Maybe it's a product, maybe it's a service. It doesn't matter. The first thing you need to do is to raise capital. Right? You need to have some. You need to get money. And why do you need money? It doesn't matter if you're a product-based business, if you're a service-based business, any business, even if it's just purely digital, like an info product business, you still need money initially to start the business. So for example, you may need money to build a team, okay? To hire a team and pay the salaries. You need money to develop your products. No matter how cheap, no matter how simple your product is, you still have to pay for samples, right? To make sure the product you're sourcing or selling is good quality. That's going to cost some money for the samples. If you're selling a complicated product, you may need development costs, right? You need to hire a team of engineers and then create prototypes. All of that costs money when it comes to product-based businesses. Even if you are a service-based business, let's say you are, I don't know, a coffee shop or a restaurant, you still need money. You still need money to pay for rents, right? To pay for equipment. Even if you're a coffee shop, you got to pay for those coffee machines. You got to pay for the chairs, the tables. So whatever you're selling, whatever your service is or product is, you still need this capital, this initial capital, to get things started. And once you get things started, you can then generate revenue, right? You have to start selling the product or delivering the service before people are willing to pay you. You can't just like charge people before you deliver your product. That's not how it works. Yeah. So that's why this is chronological. You has to follow this process of having an idea, of getting capital to build up your business, to set it up so that it's ready to deliver your product or service. And then once that's ready, you then get revenue. People then start paying you, and once you get revenue, you use the revenue to fund your ongoing costs, ongoing expenses, right? And then your ongoing expenses theoretically is going to generate you more revenue, and then the difference, right, becomes profits. That's how it should work, and that's the order it follows. You get an idea, you get money to build your business, you get revenue, and you get profits. Now, how do you actually get money though before you get revenue? And that's why it's traditionally very hard for anyone to start a business. Before you hear stats something like 97% of entrepreneurs fail or something like that. And the reason is a lot of them, like I would say half of them fail before they even get to revenue generating because they don't even have enough money to complete the setup of their business, right? Or to complete the development of the product. Maybe they get halfway and they run out of money, and there's nothing they can do about it, right? So they never get to even the third stage. I'm sure if you look at the statistics of businesses who are successful once they are revenue generating or profit generating, the stats are going to be much, much better than like 90%, which is like just kind of like fear mongering. It really is not that high when you know what you're doing and when you have the capital you need to set things up properly. So back to the topic of how do you actually generate or raise the money in the first place, right? For your team, for your R&D cost, for your rent or equipment. And it really comes down to a few things. Number one way you can generate, you can get some capital is through savings, right? Your personal savings. Maybe you worked a job for 5 years, you save like 10 grand a year and you have 50K. You have 50K you can put into your business, and of course this is super high risk because you just saved for 5 years straight, and if your business fails, you lose that 50K, right? You lost everything you worked for the past 5 years. So as you can imagine, this way of funding a business is very high risk. The second way is loans. Again, loans is very similar to savings in the sense that you need to have a high-paying job before you can even leverage this option, because banks are not going to lend you money unless you have a high-paying job or unless you have assets, because otherwise you're a high-risk borrower. They don't want to lend money to people they think are going to not pay them back, right? So unless you have a high-paying job already or you have like a house, like assets under your name, then it's very difficult to get loans for significant amounts. Number three is then venture capital firms. Okay, so venture capital firms are companies that basically exist to invest in early stage companies. They invest a substantial amount in your company, and in return you give them a percentage of your company as equity, like shares. And so these are really the three main options traditionally for people to raise money to get beyond the second step before they are revenue generating. Now, savings and loans, I mean, unless you come from like a really well-off background or you have rich parents, it's typically very hard for you to start a business in your 20s and even in your 30s unless you have been saving very diligently and you're not buying a house or you're not spending a lot on investing in other places. So one or two is really depends on your family circumstances and background. So it's very circumstantial. Now, number three, again, it's even more difficult, I would argue, than the first two because you need connections, right? Venture capital firms don't just invest in any company. You need to have personal connections, usually, to these venture capital members, these companies, in order to even get an introduction to them, to even get a chance to pitch to them, right? And then you have to pitch to them. You have to actually impress them with your business idea, to convince them to actually invest hundreds and thousands of dollars into your business idea. So getting funding from VC firms is actually more difficult than like getting a loan from a bank or even tapping into your own personal savings. And because of this, it's very, very difficult traditionally for anyone to start a business. Only people who are wealthy, coming from a wealthy background, wealthy family, or they have access to these top VC firms, these were the only people which were really a tiny minority of people in our society could afford to start a business. Every kind of normal person really just have to do a normal 9-to-5 job, save enough money, and then buy a flat, invest in a property, and that's how they kind of have a nice life, right? They can't afford to take these high risk adventures or endeavors into starting a business because it literally means they might lose their entire life savings or they might be forever in debt to the bank, right? So that's why it's very difficult in the past to start a business, and the risks were very high. So that makes sense because if the risks are very high, and even if the rewards are high, if the risks are high, then it might not make sense for everyone to start their own business. But everything is changing in the 21st century in the last 5 to 10 years with crowdfunding. Crowdfunding essentially reverses this process. Okay, so instead of having to follow this chronological order of getting capital before you generate revenue, what crowdfunding has essentially done is it has reversed this process so you can actually generate revenue before you even have a product, before you even have the capital to build your product, right? And what this means is that now everyone can start a business because they no longer need to be kind of limited by these three options. If you don't have savings, that's fine. If you don't have loans, if you can't get loans, that's fine. If you don't have access to these venture capital firms, it's fine because you can actually raise money through crowdfunding, right? And this is essentially what crowdfunding is going to do. It's going to generate you revenue when you pre-sell your products. And that's exactly what crowdfunding is. There are many different types, but the main type of reward crowdfunding that we're talking about here is where a business pre-sells products and say, okay, pay us now, and when we build the product, we're going to sell it to you at a heavy discount. That's the point of crowdfunding. And that's why it's so transformative, because literally there's no risk to it anymore. You can raise this money, and if you use this money appropriately, you tried your best to create your product and you failed, there is no legal repercussions. There is no debt. You don't have to pay the backers back, right? All you have to do, your obligation, is to try your best to make this product a reality, and that's fine. That's it. That's your only legal responsibility once you get this money, right? Whereas in the past, if you fail, you would lose all your savings. If you failed with your bank loan, you have to pay them back. You have to just get a normal job and pay them back, right? So with crowdfunding, is very good because the risk is very low. You don't have to put in your own money. All you have to do is to raise money and try your best at making it a reality. And then once you have your products, you just have to send them out to your backers, and then you can start generating profits or generating revenue. So it completely reverses the old model of how you can start a business, and that's why it's one of the kind of most underrated way to start a business for everyone. I think everyone should try to start a business today, in this day and age, because of the low risk and high reward situation or dynamic. But most people don't realize this. Most people think it's still super high risk because they have to put in their own. They still think with this old model of having to put in their own money, getting a loan, but it's no longer like that anymore. It's like this is literally the new model, and so many people who are, who have zero savings, who are completely poor by every standard, manage to start a business, a very successful business, through this process. For example, Wool Runners, they raised $120,000. None of that money was invested by the founders of this company. It was all from backers, and obviously now they are like $1 billion company. But back then, even if they failed and they couldn't deliver these products, they have no obligations to pay these back. The risk is very, very minimal. So that's kind of one of the main key reasons why crowdfunding is literally the most transformative but underrated way to start a business today. But beyond that, there's also other reasons why you should use crowdfunding. And again, they are very integral into why certain businesses are successful and certain businesses fail. So one of the key principles that a lot of successful startups, especially digital kind of e-commerce startups, in recent years have followed is this idea of lean startup, of being very lean. And this concept is really summarized or originated in this book by Eric Ries called The Lean Startup. So the main concept in this book is that as a business owner, whether you're delivering a service or a product, but especially a product, software or hardware, is that you need to be able to constantly iterate on your product in its development cycle. What that means is that when you're developing a product, you should constantly seek feedback from your potential users or eventual customers as to how you can improve the product, right? Get their feedback, get their suggestions, and incorporate into your product while it is being developed. And this is in opposition to the traditional model of developing a product, which is you raise money, you spend like 2 months just kind of putting your head down and building a product, and then once you build it, you release it to the public. Right? That's how products are built in the past. But today, the lean startup is the new way of building a product, which is to say, you get your end consumers involved very early on during product development, and you constantly ask them for feedback, right? And so you ensure that by the time you launch your product, you have a product that people love because you have been kind of talking to your users the whole way through, getting their feedback, getting their preferences, getting rid of things they don't like, and incorporating things they love. So at the end of the day, you should have a really good product. That's better than anything on the market today. That's the whole concept of lean startup. But it's very hard to do if you just raise money from VC funds, or if you just get money from savings, getting bank loans, because with that model of raising money, your kind of motivation is just to put your head down and get your product out as soon as possible to generate revenue, so you can pay back the loans, right? Because the longer you wait, the higher interest rates are and things like that. So with crowdfunding, it's the opposite. The crowdfunding model fits in very well with the lean startup model, because when you take money from these people, they are already invested in your business. Even though you don't have a product yet, they're invested in your product development process. So when you ask them for suggestions, when you ask them for feedback on your prototypes, they are more than happy to help you out, right? Because they're invested in it. They have literally invested their own money into this venture. That's the second reason. And then the third reason, also with crowdfunding, you can expect a lot of organic traffic. So with any typical campaign, let's say, again, using this example of $120,000, you can expect anywhere between 20% to 80% of this comes from Kickstarter itself, which means you don't need to, pay for advertising to generate traffic, to generate sales. You can actually just post your campaign on Kickstarter or Indiegogo with limited advertising, and you can generate traffic, generate sales, because of the kind of local crowd or audience that's already on this platform, just browsing, looking for interesting products to back. And the fourth reason is also, briefly mentioned this, is being featured by premium publications. These are your kind of big media outlets like Yahoo News, Mashable, USA Today, Fox News. All these different media outlets, they love to feature cool products. And a lot of the time, when they don't have anything to talk about in the newspapers or articles, right, and they go on these platforms to find interesting, cool, innovative products to fill the empty space on their publications. And so that's kind of the last reason why I would use crowdfunding, because by getting featured on these platforms, you are building your brand equity. What I mean by that is there is a difference between a business and a brand. And a brand oftentimes is just a business that is more well-known, that has a better brand recognition. And one way of building brand recognition really quickly is to be featured by these publications, because everyone who comes across that article or reads that publication is going to learn about your brand. So those are some kind of minor reasons why I would suggest using crowdfunding, whether you actually need the money or not. But the biggest reason why it's so powerful is because it allows you to start a business with little to no risk, because it's not your own money. And it means that it really is the great equalizer. I think in many ways is the number one biggest equalizer, better even more impactful than the lowering ad costs from Facebook or Google ads. And that's because it allows anyone, no matter how rich or poor you are, no matter what your background, no matter what your connections are, to start a business. And that really is the greatest equalizer. In the past, only people who are rich, who had connections, can start businesses, which were unfair. But now anybody, as long as they have an internet, as long as they can learn, willing to work hard, is able to start their own business. So I hope that information is helpful to you. And if you enjoy this content, if you like information on how to start your own business, how to create a passive income and achieve financial freedom, then like this video and subscribe to this channel.